Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for attending our July very wet council meeting. On behalf of the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council, I'll call this meeting to order. And to begin our meeting today, I would like to call on Brittany Cochran to call the roll. Brittany, may we have the roll, please?
Christy Bennett, Maria Blanco, Carmen Brabham, Lieutenant Dustin Browning, Bridget Bryant, Representative Ken Carver, Zenobia Curtis, Dr. Michelle DeMolinaire, Senator Rick Edmonds, Amy Ewing, Jim Garvey, Deputy Chief Nicholas Heinen, Antoinette Horde, Ariel Hughes,
Proxy Jennifer Stevenson.
thank you, Representative Jason Hughes, Jody Joseph, Dr. Ashley Lucas, Tafta Miller, Amy E. Moran, Caroline Oglesby, Norma Palma, Jonathan Pierce, Dr. Paula Polito,
Present.
Jen Roberts, Dr. Libby Saunier, Dr. Shanda Terrio, David Thibodeau, Hari Wahid, Shannon Weiss, Amy Zapata. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do not have a quorum, so we're now going to take a moment to review the minutes and offer corrections if there are any. All right, no corrections. So our first item is a discussion of proposed revisions to bulletins in response to Act 409 of the 2025 regular legislative session. I'm going to now transition to Barry Carter, Assistant Superintendent, and Karen Powell, Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Early Childhood Care and Education, to provide an overview of Act 409 and these proposed revisions.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming and going through the rain that you got here. I know it probably wasn't the best thing, but appreciate you being here anyway. And so we just kind of want to spend a few minutes on the act that went into effect, 409. This is Senator Barrow's bill. This bill was a very large, extensive bill that just went through. We kind of want to go on some key topics that we've got that's been presented to us, as well as Karen, I know, will kind of go more into depth on kind of what these are. So pretty much involving our child welfare. Number one thing is the licensing of non-public schools, their pre-K programs, 254 of those across the state. That's going to now require a license in those pre-K programs, as well as minimum standards for all the learning centers and pre-K programs across the state. There are 15 of those that we'll kind of discuss in detail with you on those, as well as a clearance for employment provided by DCFS involving the central registry that they're going to have, and a mandatory reporter training and procedural updates that's been included to that. So kind of one of the things that we're doing right now as a department for the transition to all of these 254 licensures is the training opportunities that we want to provide for all of these schools that we're wanting to do. We're going to go into depth about that as well. These are held, some of these are held bi-weekly. I think some of them are weekly, right? Yeah, some of those are weekly as well. They're because the deadline is January the 1st, 2026 for the new licensures to be put in. Okay, so for them to apply for the license by January the 1st, 2026. Excuse me. So three of those, we have a Bulletin 137 new provider orientation that we're providing for all of these schools, as well as an initial licensure process guidance webinar that we're providing, and the EdLink new user account, the setup and the access that we're getting with those schools to show them how to do that. So they can be taken in any order. They will be repeated, obviously, every month through December. So if they miss one, they can get that again. So it's not a miss this, you're never going to get it again, kind of a situation. Also, we've developed a FAQ document for their non-public schools right now that we're putting together with questions that they're having that we can give them with information about Bulletin 137. And we've been working on that pretty extensively over the past week. And we've kind of got that in transition right now. So at this time, Karen will kind of go with you on the minimum standards and after that.
So, because one of the main largest components of Act 409, as Barry said, is the licensure of non-public schools, we'll go ahead and start looking through the revisions, the proposed revisions to Bulletin 137. You'll see, and if you reviewed it prior to the meeting, you may have noted most of the proposed revisions have to do with implementing the act. There are, in addition, some proposed revisions that, just as we do throughout the year, when we open Bulletin, if we are seeing things that concern us in the field, where we feel like the field could use some clarification, or where children might be at risk, there are a few other items we've also added to the proposed revisions. But you'll see that the majority of this is reflective of the requirements of Act 409. So if we can go ahead and jump into Section 103, the definitions, you'll see exactly what I just pointed out, that really these changes are about complying with and aligning with Act 409. So in the definition of early learning center, we've added that these non-public school pre-kindergarten programs will now be considered in this bulletin as an early learning center. You can imagine if we had to update that definition throughout the whole bulletin, that would be very difficult and confusing. So the best solution is really to add those sites here to this definition. You note that the definition does not include some non-public schools and registered family daycare homes. Again, this is in direct alignment with Act 409 and what the law allows and requires. Because schools are unique and are a little bit different from our early learning centers, and that, you know, many of these are serving pre-K through 4th, pre-K through 8th, we felt like it was helpful to add a definition for licensed space so that the schools understood the difference between which spaces they'll be monitored for versus which unlicensed spaces will not count towards that monitoring. And then you see an update to the definition in State Central Registry. Again, that's in direct alignment with the language in Act 409. And you see the inclusion of a definition for a student mentor, because another critical component of many of these them employ a buddy system. And they use older students, like in 6th or 7th grade, as mentors to those children. So those mentors might help escort the children to church on the school site, and so that helps keep the children safe in transit, as well as helps the children stay engaged during church. They may also send those buddies, those mentors, to the classrooms to get children excited about reading and to do reading with the children. So we wanted to include that possibility and really maintain that strong practice that the schools are already doing. So any questions or thoughts about Chapter 103?
Love the idea behind it. I would like to consider the allowing childcare providers, early learning centers, to have some unlicensed space for camps, school-age children, after school, holidays, to match up with the non-public schools. So basically to allow for not licensing school-age children.
I think it's about not licensing the spaces, but yes, exactly. We can absolutely have these conversations about what that would look like and could look like. All right, Chapter 3, Licensure, and Section 301. Again, aligning with the Act 409 itself. The term really is non-public, And so that's just replacing the term private with non-public. And then you can see that they are no longer, that if children have not reached age 5 by September 30th, they shall be licensed. Previously, if children had not reached age 3, they should be licensed, but Act 409 increased that age from 3 to 5. Then in Section 303, you again see the reflections of Act 409, that the non-public is no longer exempt from licensure unless it serves only children in grades kindergarten and above. Again, you see the exemption for pre-kindergarten programs accredited by the Louisiana Montessori Association, where all children have reached age 3 by September 30th. And again, you see that a registered family daycare home is exempt from Bulletin 137 regulations. And then in Section 305, you'll see that we were just looking there, again, a school is different from a center in that a school is not typically owned by an individual. And so you'll see that in consultation with legal, we added some terminology such as an individual or entity. So any questions about Chapter 3 and any of the proposed revisions there? Questions or comments? Okay, Chapter 5. Again, in consultation with legal, it was suggested that we add to the definition of juridical entity or other non-natural person, just to make sure that the bulletin better included and incorporated the schools. We'll move on to Chapter 7.
Can you check the audio for the live stream?
Can staff check that? Thank you, Tafta. Chapter 7, Section 701. Again, because typically schools don't have a direct owner, we just wanted to reference back the definitions of both direct and indirect ownership. And looking at the definition of indirect ownership in the bulletin, we felt like that would include schools, as the definition is stated. All right, so any questions about Section 501 or 701? Okay, moving on to Section 705. This is a proposed revision that came about from a pretty severe and significant incident that came to our attention this spring, and then learning that this may happen in other cases as well. So there was a center at which the center had video, so the center provided the video to us. The children were very happily playing in their classroom. The teacher was working with the children, and all of a sudden you see a man run through the classroom, and the children and teacher look quite startled. And then soon thereafter, you see police running into the classroom after the man. And so when we were discussing the security about the site does not have a secured single point of entry to the site. The doors are left unlocked. And so our staff was very concerned about this. Our legal team is very concerned about this. And because of that, and talking to a number of providers about what they practice and what they think is best practice, we propose the addition of maintaining a secured single point of entry into the licensed space to provide for supervision of ingress and egress during operating hours or when children are present. Because we don't want to ignore when something is brought to our attention that is of serious concern. Questions or comments?
I know me and Jonathan had a conversation about this before, so I told him that we can kind of meet with this a little bit later about maybe looking at the verbiage that's included in that. So I just want that noted down. He was asking about the terminology involving the ingress and egress, basically mean like if there's certain doors and certain sites that are allowing kids in, allowing kids out, making sure that they can have multiple doors within a center that they can come in and out. Is that pretty much what she was asking about, John? Yeah.
So that's part of it. I think that the verbiage is a little premature, and I worry about unintended consequences and unfunded mandates on some providers. And I think that, that, like you said, Barry, I think there's I just think there's more work to do with the verbiage to make sure that everyone is that we find any unintended consequences.
Could we discuss some of the verbiage so that we have an open dialogue as part of the advisory council, so we can understand what some of the might be an unintended consequence?
I would be happy to give examples of how this could potentially close people, force them to not be able to operate, which is shrinking access rather than expanding access. The verbiage does say a singular point of entry, whereas we have some centers that have buildings with doors that lead directly into the classroom. So they have multiple points of entry. So they would have to have large construction to have a singular point of entry. Or you have other centers that rent facilities that would have to change a door, and their landlord might say, no, you cannot change my door. So then they would also have to close. And again, I'm pretty sure we all agree that we want to expand access and not shrink it.
I think also fire marshal, there could be some fire marshal implications with the egress portion. The doors that are here have the crash bars, so they could be locked on the outside, but still allow egress in the event of a fire or an emergency without allowing access in. Some businesses, childcare or otherwise, have doors that don't have that panic bar, and so the fire marshal makes the door, if it is an exit as well, an emergency exit, then they do require that door stay unlocked during the day. And so it would require modifications to the door, potentially the frame, change the door itself, which could be costly. And so I just think that there's dialogue that needs to happen a little bit more to work through some of the, making sure that everything is better.
And I think, Barry, what you were talking about too, because our minds are kind of going to the hardware of the single point. It's not having a locked front door. It's monitoring that single point entry. So just clarification there, that we're not necessarily talking about locked doors. We're just talking about a monitored single point entry.
Are there suggested word changes today?
One suggestion I would like to make is perhaps making this part of our emergency preparedness plan and required training for staff on that plan annually, and a TA campaign, since LDOE, through licensing inspections, LDOE is able to reach every provider in that form. So that would be a wonderful opportunity to have an open dialogue with providers and educate them on the risks and potential solutions.
Other questions or comments? Or proposed verbiage?
I just want to note that was involved, our Sonia, when we was having all of our meetings with all of our advocacy groups, and they kind of brought this conversation up when they asked of us to have a conversation before that. So that's what that was, but I was wanting to bring it. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it's just a way to get it on public record so
Yeah.
that people can go back and understand the conversation with the concern.
Absolutely. Thank you.
other commentary about section 705 and access? Suggestions or questions? All right, section 709. Noting that a license, this language was present in the bulletin, but over several bulletin changes, it kind of got a little bit lost and obscured. And so this is an attempt to clarify that a license is issued for a specific location and that all care at that location must be provided in accordance with the terms of the license, including care that's full-time, year-round, before or after care, or for summer or holiday camps. So for example, a licensed space is not licensed for maybe just 9 particular months of the year. That if children are there, a licensed space, and if a license has been administered, a licensed space is a licensed space.
So if that's the case, then what we were talking about with definitions of 103, where Jonathan was talking about the unlicensed space for schools, how does that fit together with this then?
So in a school, there are certain unlicensed spaces that remain unlicensed spaces. So for example, the kindergarten classrooms through the 8th grade classrooms, they are unlicensed spaces year-round because a portion of that campus is licensed. And so perhaps you've got 2 wings in the school. And
I think, let me clarify because it wasn't clear. So Jonathan said, well, maybe we should think about if there's the ability to have an unlicensed space, maybe in a childcare center. But with this right here, it's saying if you're using it at any point within the year, it's a licensed space. So you couldn't then unlicense a certain space for a certain time of the year?
there are separations on a single like school campus or site campus, that there are separations between licensed spaces and unlicensed spaces. So we do currently, for example, at a school that might also have a Head Start program, there's the licensed part of the school, the Head Start program, and the unlicensed part.
But I'm talking about a childcare center.
But yes,
I would imagine that this would be similar to spaces specifically for 4-year-olds that could go through fire marshal and get to the 25 square foot versus the 35. It would be a similar scenario. Is that kind of what you were thinking, Jonathan? It's a space specifically used for that purpose and that purpose alone,
or just for school-age children only.
to be unlicensed?
Yeah, so like, yes, to have a space that throughout the year is only for 5 years and up.
Yeah.
Or after school, or for summer camp, or holidays, when those children are out of school, coming to a childcare provider, to have a space for them that is unlicensed. But the idea is to not require licensure for 5 and up, just like the non-public and public schools. But I was trying to understand this one. So in what scenario, like, what would be a scenario where this comes into play, where 709J would come into play?
Sheila, is that something you want to come speak to? Or I didn't see if Andrea was in here. Is she in here? Oh, Andrea, do you want to come speak to that?
Putting you on the spot.
Good afternoon. So for a childcare center, it's actually pretty much what the young lady is saying down with the glasses. I don't, right now, as it stands, once you're licensed, like for a childcare center, once that space is licensed, like for instance, if you wanted to do a summer camp, the bulletin reads that all care provided at that address, that location, has to be under that license. So currently, there is no opportunity for it to be separated.
Is that currently or with this?
Even with this addition, it's the same.
I guess. So my question is, I'm just curious as to the point of adding this. What does it do that we're not already doing? Or what does it address that we're not already addressing?
I think we were just trying to make it more clear just to make sure that it was understood, because we felt like when we were revising the bulletin to include the lead agencies, we don't have the whole copy here, but we were saying it and we just wanted to make sure it clear, because we kept saying like, except for when you have a lead agency at the same location, you can do this, this, and that. But we just wanted to make sure it clear. I would have to show you the whole bulletin to make it make sense to you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm still confused. Am I missing something?
Yes, ma'am, to provide a clear explanation to the schools.
Okay. Um, okay.
Any other questions or comments on 709? Okay, similarly, I think that section 711, renewal applications, was intended to be some clarification while we were in this section of the bulletin. So we are currently having a challenge in that it seems that there is some confusion between the license expiration date and the renewal submission deadline. Those are two different dates. And we know from conversations with some providers that some providers are thinking they are the same date. And so we're getting applications for renewals submitted very close to or at the actual end of the license. And so this is taking an opportunity to say, we know this is causing a lot of stress and duress for the field. We are not only addressing it in bulletin, we will be trying to clarify that in our monthly webinars, our monthly newsletter, outreach with Child Care Association for Louisiana, outreach with For Providers by Providers, and other partners, but that it didn't help if the bulletin seemed to contradict or didn't explain that clearly either. And so it puts up front at the very first statement of section 711 that the application for renewal of a license shall be submitted using the department's online electronic system prior to the first day of the month in which the current license expires. And so then in our outreach, in our webinars, in our newsletter, we're giving examples. So for example, if your license expires July 31st, your renewal application needs to be submitted no later than June 30th. So just working to clarify that with the field, because with the implementation of prospective payments, what's happening is we're getting license renewal applications at the last minute. It is not possible to turn them around when they are submitted on the day that they expire. We can't pay a site that doesn't have a current license. So then a site is waiting for payments. We're having to add in manual payments. And so it's causing duress all around. So we will be working, like I said, not just to correct it in bulletin, but to clarify with other comms to the field. But it felt important not to be inconsistent between the comms to the field and the bulletin also. And then you see in E, just a reminder that we need that complete submission prior to the deadlines so that it doesn't result in non-renewal or expiration or any other negative consequences. I will say in our stakeholder engagement, we are talking about other components that are due with the renewal application and working to make sure when we do these comms to the field about the difference between a license expiration date and a renewal application submission date, that we also provide guidance about what to do if you're still awaiting your fire marshal inspection or your LDH inspection, because we want to make sure that we are eliminating barriers to providers and getting those applications submitted and processed timely. So any questions or comments about 711?
Thank you for addressing some concerns that we had.
We always listen. We always work to address them. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, moving on to Chapter 9, Section 901, change in location. Again, when we notice that there is a lack of clarity and when we are opening up the bulletin, we do take the opportunity to try to provide better clarification. And so just noting that when a center changes location, the center must submit a change in location application and have obtained approval from the department of the location change application prior to opening at the new application. So in other words, we need to make sure, yes, you may have been approved at your prior location, but locations are very different from one another. And just because you've submitted the application, we need to make sure the inspections are complete at the new application and that you are approved. All right. If there are no questions or comments about Chapter 901, we'll turn to Chapter 11 and Section 1103. This returns us to alignment with Act 409, these proposed revisions. As Barry mentioned, and as we'll talk about shortly when we finish the bulletin revision review, Act 409 requires that child safety and minimum standards information be distributed by all early learning programs. So private childcare, public pre-K, non-public pre-K. And so it's just aligning with Act 409, a stipulation that the LDOE shall provide this information to each center no later than August 1st of each year, and that those centers shall distribute the document to parents of all children enrolled at the beginning of each school year, and that it may be distributed electronically. So you have in your folders, and you can see a snippet on screen of that drafted child safety and minimum standards information that will be distributed. So any questions or comments about Section 1103?
This clears it up nicely. Just one quick question. At the bottom right, it says school name complaint line, and there's no number. Is that,
That will be filled in later. This is just the draft. So that will be different for each school and each school district.
so will each school or school district have a separate complaint line phone number?
Yes, for their services.
And so that number would go to the school or would go to the department?
That will go in the form when we distribute it to you. So
Right.
it will not be incomplete when you receive it.
But is that a number for the school?
Yes,
To contact the
because
school? Okay.
only if you're in a school receiving services and you have a complaint.
Got it.
Yes.
So that would be customized for each district.
Yes.
Karen, do you happen to know if that's going to take the place of that existing, you can call to confirm that we're licensed by the state? That's in policies. and
The ratio or the light, because you're still required to post your license.
Right, no, this
Yeah.
is in our parent, when we
Yeah.
hand out to parents, we give them a phone number that they can call to verify that we are in fact licensed by the state. This is in addition?
This-
Okay.
Yes. Yes, because it's specifically trying to make families aware of those minimum standards, and then if they have concerns that those are not being met, give them someone to communicate with and someone who can look into that for them. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll move to Chapter 13, Section 1305. So this again is a proposed revision that arose from a pretty significant incident that happened this spring. And let's talk just for a moment about suspensions. So the department, from time to time, issues suspensions of licenses. And that occurs when you don't want to revoke a license and permanently close a center, but it's typically occurred and we expect will most likely be used in the future when there has been a natural disaster of some kind, a significant weather event. So for example, when there's been a significant hurricane and you have a number of centers with damage to their sites, we don't want to close those centers and make them reapply when they're repaired. We just want to suspend the license until they get that wall reinstalled or that roof put on, and then be able to reactivate them as smoothly as possible as soon as it is safe again for children and they've recovered from those terrible circumstances. So typically, that's when a suspension happens. And you'll notice that in 1305A, we very deliberately suggested the language notice of suspension may be posted. we're not thinking in the case of a natural disaster that impacts the community that we would be posting that notice of suspension. We would suspend the license until the center was ready to reopen, but we would not post that. I think it would also be pretty evident to anyone if they visited the site that, the site is closed and there's a problem there. But we had a significant incident happen in the last few weeks, the last 2 weeks, where we found out that a child got very ill, was found to have a very high level of lead poisoning, and that the cause of the lead poisoning was traced back to the early learning site. And so LDH contacted us, asked us to immediately close the site, and we said we will suspend the site because we want to give the site, the opportunity to conduct the necessary remediation. And if they conduct that and it becomes a safe location again, of course we want them to be able to reopen and continue to serve children at that point. But it was very important to us because of the nature of that situation and how serious lead exposure is for children under age 6, that we make sure families understood that that site was suspended. And it was also a very sudden change, so we needed families to understand that in these special circumstances, this is a change. The center cannot be open. We need you to understand that your children cannot be here at this time. And so that led to, again, we don't expect to use this frequently, but there are certain circumstances like that where it feels very important to be able to notify the public and families that that license has been suspended. So questions or comments about section 1305?
So has there been any more discussion on just changing the word suspension to something a little less derogatory?
Please share other words.
Temporary closure by the department, and then maybe kind of have a definition in there. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Well, we also discussed, insurance uses business interruption. So an explanation on the door that it's whatever reason they're closed for, it is a business interruption. But other words that we had talked about, because suspension just sounds very negative. But it is a business interruption. If my business is closed because of lead, I would like for the community to know that my license was not suspended. I would like them to know that we've got a plumbing issue, that it's backed up into the whole center, but not my business license has been suspended. That's detrimental to my business in the community.
I would note, in a situation like that where you are temporarily closing yourself and you have a plumbing backup, we would not anticipate posting anything, but I understand your example.
But for those with business interruption insurance, it's something that we addressed a good bit during COVID in the event that we did have to close. If it would help providers who have business interruption insurance more easily go to their insurance provider and say, hey, look, this is a business interruption, not through our fault or whatever.
Other comments, questions, response? Okay, thank you for that feedback. We will move on to Chapter 15, Section 1503. Again, a serious incident that brought this to our attention, and then it's interesting that oftentimes with licensing issues, we start to notice a trend. So an incident happens, and then we start to see a trend in that same incident continuing. And so in this instance, there was a child that was injured at an early learning site, and it was not a simple accident. It was clearly through a lack of supervision because of the extended nature of the injury. It took some time for that level of injury to occur. And we actually found out through the family's lawyer when the family went to get their medical expenses reimbursed that that site no longer had active insurance. And then, as I said, we've had a few incidents happen since then. And so we're seeing two things happening. One, we've seen the submission of fraudulent insurance documentation to us, and we've only found out about it because some other incident has then happened that has made us go check on the insurance and find. We've also had a few instances where the center has submitted and paid for the insurance in order to have it in place for the inspection, and then we're finding out by chance that they're canceling it immediately following the inspection. And so because of that, in consultation with our legal department, we were proposing that the insurance policy should also list the department as a certificate holder, simply so that we would receive a notification that there is an active policy on file, and if that policy were canceled, we would be notified of that.
As a general contractor, we had that language in all our subcontracts, but you also require the insurer to supply notice within 30 days of a substantive change in the policy. So it's not just being a certificate holder. You have to have notice of the insurer to notify the certificate holders that there's been a change.
Thank you for that note. Other comments or questions? Okay. Moving on to section 1507, daily attendance records. We're back to something that arose from the impact of Act 409, that just as we define those student mentors in section 103, and just as we currently ensure that there are daily attendance records for student trainees at sites, that there also be daily attendance records for student mentors. Any questions or comments?
I do
Okay.
have a question.
Yes.
When you said student mentors, so if the students escort the lower grade students to mass, we have to have them to document that
There,
each time?
yes. We can discuss that. Is that something that happens daily or weekly? Thank you for raising that so we can continue to provide guidance on how to implement it. Thank you. All right, moving on to Chapter 17, Section 1709, Director Qualifications. Again, this is in relation to actually two things. It's partially in relation to Act 409, but it's also something that we were already looking at based on some feedback from providers, stakeholders, that there are sometimes, I mean, we spoke with some of them this spring, there are sometimes former principals who are either opening up an early learning center, a child care center, or who may be choosing to look at directorship, even if they're not the owner. And they did not have a direct path into qualifying as directors. So of course, they would qualify for the early childhood ancillary certificate, and that would qualify them to be a director. But we received some feedback from multiple providers and certainly from the schools that they would like to see a principal or assistant principal or headmaster, someone who has current or prior employment in those positions, and with the referenced credentials being allowed as a fourth track that would qualify them for director status. So any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to 1711, child to staff minimum ratios. Again, we have language directly from Act 409, so aligning with that and ensuring its implementation. Note where it says the same staff members shall not be used to meet the ratio requirements for two different groups of children at the same time. Please note that the NAP information that does allow for one staff member to supervise children napping still remains in the bulletin. Any questions about 1711 or comments? All right, 1713, supervision. Again, language to align with Act 409. And you note that that does increase the age of allowing a child to go and return from the restroom without staff from 4 to 5. Questions or comments? All right, moving on to section 1715. Another thing we are noting very frequently, and then again, as soon as your attention is drawn to it, even more incidences pop up. We saw one, unfortunately, this week. There's already a consent to release provision in the bulletin that centers have to have written parental authorization to capture or release images of the children, videos, photographs, etc. But what we are finding is some staff are using their personal devices to take pictures and video and then are posting those on their personal social media accounts or sharing them privately with other private individuals not associated with the center. And so we received some really helpful feedback from providers about the importance of not making that a deficiency on the center, because it's not something that the centers can really control or police or identify what's happening necessarily on those private accounts and what may be happening out of work hours. But we felt it was still really important. We saw a pretty horrifying video that was shared publicly this week, and we felt it was important to add that to what must be kept in staff records, that the staff must sign confirming that they've been told they're not allowed to do that. So at least the staff would know and be reminded, and hopefully that would reduce the incidence of it happening and safeguard more children.
I do appreciate this compromise. It feels less punitive and regulatory and more like protecting the provider. So thank you for that compromise.
Thank you for the feedback.
Can this be added to our orientation form that y'all,
I'm sorry, can you clarify, Tafta?
can y'all add it to the orientation or create an annual, like everything that we need to do annually, like, is there a way that
One
y'all
spot?
can pull that out of there?
Let's talk, are you suggesting maybe just a different section? Or am I misunderstanding?
Well, I know the orientation form is when they're hired, but I guess it would have to be a separate. But if it's on the orientation and we go over it when they're hired with us, this is saying annually that we have to go over it. So that's another check mark of what we have to do annually. If it's signed off on when they're hired, that should be sufficient because we have a signature for it.
We can look at that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on 1715? All right,
Good
moving.
question, Karen. So
Yes.
Tafta, so I'm thinking if it's in our employee policies and procedures, we've checked that box, but are you saying it's annual?
That's what it says right now, but I think Taft is suggesting instead of being annual, it could be at higher.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Clear that up. Thank you.
All right, moving on to 1727, child neglect and abuse mandatory reporter training. Again, this aligns with Act 409. So nothing has changed in the other part of the bulletin that requires that annual completion of the DCFS mandated reporter training of all staff members. But now, in addition, centers will be required to report to the LDOE by September 30th of each year a list of the teachers and childcare providers employed by the entity that have complied with the training requirements, as well as any who have not complied, because the department is required to then report that in turn. So this is just in accordance with Act 409 additional requirements. Any questions about that? Or comments? We will, thank you for asking that question for multiple reasons. Let me note that this will not go into effect until the 26-27 school year, so not until another year from now, which will allow us time to provide you with guidance. We're developing the system right now. We're thinking we will probably add this as a component to EdLink, but we will definitely give you guidance on that as that development is in place. And it's nothing that goes into effect this fall. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question now. So you'd mentioned it going into EdLink. Does that mean that we would also get notification, like as a reminder? Because I do appreciate that it's a year from now, but that still allows us time to forget.
Oh,
we have to
absolutely,
comply.
absolutely, yes. So, just as I believe we give you regularly that annual notice of it's time to send out the influenza notification.
Correct.
We'll be sending you also, it's time to send out your minimum safety and welfare standards. It's time to, enter it in by this date.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. But I'm making a note anyway, even though I know that's our standard practice.
And I know we're going to discuss this more, but it also says in those employees who have not complied. So what is that?
So that means if you have any employees, it means you need to do a complete check of your records. And so, because of course, your anniversary dates on your licenses all vary completely across the year. And so you may have been in compliance with that at your annual inspection that might have taken place in February, but you may have had new employees join between February and September that might have somehow missed that training, even though please don't let them miss that training because you're not allowed to let them miss that training. And so you would have to check your records in September of all current staff at that point in time in September and say, I verify that these are all my staff and that these have complied. And so if you have any that have not complied by that deadline, you are required by law to report that. But of course, what you need to do is make sure that everyone has complied because that's what's best for children.
Logistics question. If we have a staff, because currently we just do it once a year. So if I hired someone in November, then they would have until the following November. With this, do I need to have them do it prior? Because I could submit September 30th. They would be current.
They would be.
Okay, so then we can keep their date at November?
We'll add some guidance on that too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it does change, because you can't access to do another mandated reporter training until you've made right before that year. So you can't
you can't go back and access it in September, even if your renewal date was December. And it varies by, each staff member.
I certainly want to consult with legal before I answer definitively on anything, but I would think that it meant you were within an annual time from when the employee had taken it. So, but we will confirm. And I will note, just for those who are interested and haven't heard yet, my understanding is that DCFS is updating that training and will be releasing a new training approximately August 1st. So, as soon as we learn more about it, we will share it in the monthly webinar and the monthly newsletter. Okay, moving on to section 1805. Again, just alignment with the language of Act 409. That Act 409 changes justified finding to substantiated finding. So no questions or concerns? All right, moving to section 1901, general safety requirements. Again, knowing that some schools will have a wing, for example, of the school that is the licensed early learning space, and that wing may not have a phone like a self-contained early childhood center might have. We just added in that it could be a dedicated phone or a two-way communication system to report the need for help. And frankly, we've heard feedback from providers that they appreciate that addition as well. Then 1903. Again, in response to the implications of the implementation of Act 409, a school, it is not helpful to children or the school site that maybe the children will have turned 4 by September 30th, but they might not be 4 on the day that you start the program, August 1st. And so, keeping those children out of the classroom for that week or that month or those 2 months doesn't really seem the intent of the law or effective. And so we are updating 1903 D1A to note that as of August 1st of each academic year, children who will be age 4 and above by September 30th of that same year should have a minimum of 25 square foot of usable indoor space. Comments or questions about 1901 or 1903? All right, and then 1907. Again, this one stemmed from a trend and a particularly upsetting incident that we heard about at several sites, small children getting access to and ingesting water beads, and the water beads expanding, and several children ending up hospitalized and several almost dying. So we were proposing to ban water beads, but based on some stakeholder feedback, we adjusted it to note that all toys and learning materials in classrooms shall be age and developmentally appropriate, because those water beads are not appropriate for children 5. So again, a case of something very terrible brought to our attention, and we cannot and would not wish to ignore that. So any questions or suggestions about 1907?
Again, I just want to say thank you for that compromise. And I think not only are we addressing Orbeez here, but we're addressing every toy that is within the reach of children in classrooms. So thank you for this.
We appreciate the feedback. That's why we have discussion and make sure we think through the implications as well as the serious thing causing us to bring the proposal. All right, we're in the home stretch, folks. 1919. It's not only infants necessarily who might have bottled formula or breast milk, so updating infants to children. Any questions, suggestions? right. Chapter 21, Section 2103. It's just reminding, especially those who are newer to the bulletin, that there are requirements for drivers, both here in Chapter 21 as well as in Section 1719. So you know that laws and policies sometimes cross-reference, and that's what we're doing here as a clarification. And then in Section 2109, non-vehicular excursions, we're proposing that providers use a form provided by the department. I believe it's already a sample form available to the field, to make sure it has all the components that are needed to authorize and document those non-vehicular excursions. So any comments or questions about 2103 or 2109?
So 2103, I mean, it looks like it's new. You're adding 1719, which is orientation training.
But we didn't change anything in 1719. It's just adding a reference to it, as policy
But so
and
that
law
was
sometimes
the
does.
requirement before?
1719, there's no change there.
Right, but it was a requirement for contracted drivers to have orientation training?
Drivers,
But this is contracted drivers, not
but they're still
staff
drivers, and that's what we want to clarify. We want to make sure that anyone providing transportation understands the safe way of transporting children,
Okay,
regardless of how you hire.
so I
driver.
agree 100% with the safety of transporting children. And I don't have orientation and training in front of me, but orientation training also requires a lot more, that the driver, so under contracted transportation, it's different, right?
It's still about making sure they're doing that check of the whole vehicle, above seats, below seats, around sides. That's what we're making sure all drivers are doing those fundamental things.
Okay, I'm sorry, the transportation regulations in accordance with this chapter and 719, so they don't have to complete the entire orientation
We're
training.
not doing
just
teachers' orientation training at all, but
Drivers, okay.
1719 is about transportation specifically.
Oh, I thought I just pulled it up and it was orientation training. Am I wrong?
Sorry, it's D. I think it's section D in 1719 relates to them and specifically references the transportation.
Got it. Thank you. Can we add D?
Honestly, I think it's a technical thing. I had it in there initially, and I'm just not sure policy's written that way, but I can make a note of that.
Okay. I just don't want it to be confused with the drivers, the contracted drivers have to go through A, B, C, E, F, G.
I understand. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the review and the feedback.
I know we've had comment throughout, but do we have any other comments from our council members? Do we have any public comment? Okay, we will now move on to our next and final item.
Still have a few items, sorry.
Oh,
under
I'm sorry.
409,
Okay.
So sorry about that. So again, we showed you this will be the minimum standards information shared with sites. I think the remote got tired. Let's see, maybe it's working now. Yes, it's working now. Thank you. Just got stuck, I suppose. All right, so in addition, again, we really probably can't understate that Act 409 is very extensive. And it has implications for the Department of Education, for the Department of Children and Family Services, for law enforcement, for early childhood, and for K-12. And so we just wanted to note a couple of other sections just for your information. that there are additional requirements about checking the state central registry to ensure the safety of children, and that is for non-public or school system employees, whether they're temporary, part-time, or permanent, whether they're bus operators, substitutes, janitors, administration, teachers. You also see that this mandatory reporter training requirement that we just reviewed in bulletin also goes across the board for all types of settings and through K-12. You also see some additional regulations for schools that all instances of alleged child abuse that occur in a school setting shall be reported to the guardian, to law enforcement, regardless of the alleged perpetrator, so whether that's an adult or a child. So you see some additional regulations regarding that. So when to report to whom. And so we just wanted to make sure, because Act 409 was very extensive, that we provided you with some summary of that today, since it does, as Barry noted, impact child welfare so broadly across multiple settings.
All right, any additional comments? Public comments? All right. Ready to move on? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move to the 2024 Early Childhood Care and Education Annual Report, the 2025 Quarter 1 Report, and the 2025 Quarter 2 Report.
Great job, Karen. That was a lot. And so hopefully you still got some left in your tank for the rest of this, okay? It was a very large bill, and we're working towards it. So appreciate your feedback in that. So at this time, I want to kind of go over some goals for early childhood care, some things that you probably are already aware of, just some things that we kind of want to reemphasize with you. Obviously, aligning ourselves with the Louisiana's educational priorities. As you can tell, you know, when you look at an educational priority, obviously the first one, you can see that early childhood leading to kindergarten readiness is early childhood. But if you look more in depth in it, we comprise a large portion of the priorities that encompass the entire state, okay? As well as the literacy instruction, as well as the math instruction, an effective teacher for every student, educational choice for students and families. You know, that's what I was telling Dr. Polito when we were getting started with this. You know, early childhood is such a large portion of our state, and making sure that we're bringing that awareness to the rest of the state of just how big a deal this really is and how big of an impact that early childhood makes on every facet that involves our state. So one of the ways how we measure success, obviously we've had this for, I think, about a year now, Karen, is to increase the percentage of our early childhood sites that are rated high, proficient, or excellent by 5 percentage points. Kind of want to go through the process and how we measure those success. So our key endeavors that we look at, as you can tell, we increase our language development for kids 0 to 4 at the early childhood sites. Two of the ways we do this is we provide targeted regional and statewide professional development opportunities, working with our CCR&Rs within our own department, making sure that we're giving out resources, as well as professional development to all of our teachers across the state. Also, we've got a platform online called EC Learn that we're giving more resources for all of our teachers across the state to help them grow in their professional developments. Building those pathways for those early childhood professionals is also a key endeavor that we try to look for, as well as keeping the retention factor, keeping great teachers in those classrooms, appreciating them. Streamlining our own processes and operations, so where we support the sites as effectively as possible, making sure that effectiveness, what does it look like, making sure that it's just not us saying it, but is actually us doing it and providing some examples on what we're wanting to do with that. Utilizing the data that help us to identify the highest needs of all of our low-performing early childhood sites, clearly identifying where we could better use where they could better use our support and how we can kind of give them that. As well as expanding developmental screenings across our EC program types that ensures children and families receive the support they need. Exploring state agencies, successful models. One of the things that we've done, I know in this think it's in this, the last time we had, looking at different models across the state. I know Dr. Sonja was kind of giving me some feedback on that, is looking at different things we want to do with partnerships and that, as well as local community organizations in order to best meet community needs, engaging families that better understand early childhood experiences, informing them to support their young children's development, looking at the milestones and things that we have with that, as well as expanding our pathways to family child care program certifications, allowing our certifications to expand across all of our early childhood sites. And so these are some of the things that we're doing across our state. Now discussing some of our publicly funded early care and education programs. Karen, you want to kind of go in detail on that?
Sure. So, in the interest of time and with respect to your time, there's obviously a lot of content that we still have in this deck and in this presentation. So what we'd like to do is certainly answer any specific questions you may have. And if I don't highlight something that you would like to pause on and highlight yourself or ask questions about, please ask me to pause. But you can see here the standard information that we provide in the annual report about the different types of early care and education programs that are funded, whether by state or federal funds across the state. And again, the different types of programs, the different types of centers, as well as the different types of home providers. You can also see information about our current access levels, so you can see the kind of funding levels we have, the numbers of children served. You can see the hours of the different programs that are offered, whether they're full year, whether they're part day. And you can see in this slide and the maps that follow, we still have many access gaps that we are all working on together to fill and improve. You do see that we continue to do fairly well at serving our economically disadvantaged 4-year-olds, and that we still really struggle with infants and 1-year-olds, as well as 2s and to a lesser degree 3s. Again, you can look at the annual access maps we provide to see what level of access there is in different parishes around the state. I will note, as a reminder, as you look at the access maps, that the scale differs on each of these maps. So for example, this is the birth through 2-year-old map, and you'll notice that, you know, the highest level is at 21% or more, which is very different from what you see on the 3-year-old access map or the 4-year-old access map, because we just have higher levels of access for 3 and 4-year-olds in the state. A reminder that our Ready Start networks continue to work diligently to expand access across the state by setting goals, working to meet those goals to improve quality, by engaging more and more stakeholders in understanding and promoting the importance of early childhood in communities, and by working to establish local funding plans that can help increase quality and or access to early care and education in communities. So we expanded, we had some additional Ready Start network cohorts introduced in 2024. We also really see a lot of participation from our Ready Start networks when we receive grants, for example, like the Preschool Development Grant. And you know that as a department, we really do love to implement pilots. But it's because we really have learned so much from pilots along the way, and they really give us so much useful information about what works in different geographic areas, different types of communities, that we can then scale up to become statewide initiatives. So you can see that the Ready Start networks participated in a number of pilot projects and research projects that we had. You see that we continued the CCAP B2 3 Seats program in 2024 and continue to serve children through that, and the Early Childhood Education Fund, the incentive fund. A new map you'll see in your annual report is this map showing the parishes kind of just in a different way that have participated in the Early Childhood Education Fund. And I haven't fully analyzed why this might be, but I think that diagonal is just rather interesting, and I think warrants some more study. You have information in the annual report about family childcare that has academic approval, which means they participate in the accountability system and they are working to improve their quality as well. We continue, as Barry noted, that's one of our key endeavors because we know that in many portions of the state, whether it's a rural area that doesn't have many other access and care options, or whether it's providing infant and toddler care, that family childcare is an essential partner in school readiness and success. And then you see some information in the annual report about quality. So I'll let Barry take us through that.
One of our key endeavors is measuring the early childhood quality. One of the things that we do is each teacher across the state is required to have a class observation. And so then it kind of goes into that site as well. And so obviously programs that are scoring below 3.75, they're participating in our site improvement planning process, and that number has gradually gotten lower and lower each year, which means that we're growing in the high proficiency. We'll kind of go more in depth with that in just a second, but just to let you know that programs that score on UNSAT for 2 years and a 3-year period may lose Type 3 license. So that's one of the reasons that we try to early identify who those sites would be and to give them extra support. On the right, you can kind of see what the performance rating is. It's also attached to you if you would like to look at that as we kind of go through this. You can kind of see in November 2024, 1,830 early learning sites that we have. You can kind of see the trajectory and the numbers that we have. So 95% of all of our early childhood sites are rated proficient or higher. 91% of those sites are high proficient or excellent. So trending on a very good way, looking very solid in regards to that. So for 22-23, all of our sites improved, as well as school scores were higher than the overall state average. All these family child care sites, initial year they grow from their pilot year, so that continues to tell us where the growth is occurring. On this slide here, you can kind of see the tax credits and the bonuses are for child care sites are aligned to this quality rating system. So we try to reward and incentivize their performance and their improvement. So you kind of see 3 stars or higher are eligible to receive 4 rounds of CCAP bonus payments during 2024. And looking at that slide, you can kind of see on the proficient all the way to the right, it's a 36%, and then the next highest is 47%, which is our high proficient, and then excellent. And so our goal right now is taking the approaching proficient and the proficient and putting a lot of emphasis into that area to try to get them to the high proficient as well, which is one of our key endeavors. Enrollment by quality rating, 98% of all of our students and children that are in public funding are enrolled in a site that is proficient or higher. And so it's something to be proud of and something to congratulate all of you in regards to what you've been doing with that as well. Again, seeing the same data that we just provided to you before. And so I think it's up to you again here on the quality improvement.
Yes, so you see that we continue to provide quality improvement supports, which have led in conjunction with the tremendous work of our providers, but the supports and the partnership between providers and these support units have really led to those achievements that Barry pointed out. And so you see that we continue to invest in CCR&R training and coaching and technical assistance, mental health consultation, and new teacher professional development. I will note that CCR&R assistance is very targeted, very data-driven, just in accordance with our key endeavors that we're really looking at who are the new teachers, who are, we used to look at who are the sites that are unsatisfactory or approaching proficient, but now, as Barry noted, who is proficient that we can help to strengthen even further? And how can we look at specific domains and help get improvements in instructional support, engaged support for learning, and specific domains as well? You also see information, just a deeper dive into the number of units provided of the services, some information, as Barry noted, about site improvement planning, reminders about the professional development we offer at the annual Teacher Leader Summit and the annual Early Childhood Conference. I believe that we will reference that in our quarterly reports as well coming up, but just a reminder that we will be having our Early Childhood Conferences this September in Baton Rouge and October in Shreveport, and we would love to have you join us for those. It's very, very inspiring to see about 1,500 educators from across the state give up a Saturday to come and learn more to support young children and their families. We continue to work to strengthen leadership practices and support directors. We continue to invest the state's comprehensive literacy state development grant and further supports for sites and further improvements in early language and literacy development. And we continue to work to increase developmental screenings. And again, you see a lot of numbers in these slides because we are tracking the data to see, are we reaching more people? How does this compare to, national statistics? And so continually using that data to help us further improve and extend our outreach. And now Barry will go a little deeper into the evaluation of the programs.
So right now, going back to what I was discussing earlier with our observations with class, over 14,000 class observations took place in 7,190 classrooms. And so this is a high number, which is also a good thing because that means that we're increasing that access and we're increasing more and more students, which means we're increasing more and more teachers. And so more than 1,300 of these observers conducted observations in an infant, toddler, and a pre-K classroom. This provides valuable feedback to directors at sites as well as our RSNs and our CCRNRs to be able to give some support where needed as well. So most of these sites are achieving the highest performance rating of excellent. More of these sites, which is 18%, as compared to 14 the last year. Just to kind of let you know what our key performance indicator, trying to reach that, kind of going back to that, bringing attention. So obviously looking at our quality distribution over time, the high number, 68% is our high proficient. That's the way the data is trending, which is the way we want it to go. Low quality go down, proficient go down, high proficient go up. As well as here's another example of that diagram there, filling in the gaps and ensuring that our quality is growing over time. One of the things I want to kind of look at here is our pre-K domain scores. You'll see there's 3 domains: the emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. As you can see, there's an increase in all 3 of these domains. However, the instructional support is our lowest. So that's one of the areas that we've really been trying to focus, which is why literacy is such a huge part of our drawing a blank here, focus here. And so one of the things we want to put some emphasis and resources to help sites with this area here to try to get that number up as well. With our pre-K domain scores, you can kind of see the statewide score of all domains is 549, and you can kind of tell where we're at in regards to seeing this gradual increase, which is good, and just really paying attention to our instructional support. However, I do want to note that our instructional support has grown over the past. Since 2016 to 2017, you can kind of see the areas. We had a spike. Obviously, I think that was our COVID year, and then after that, we've been a gradual increase since then. Going to our toddler and infant domain scores, you'll tell that these domains are different. You can kind of see an emotional behavioral support as well as an engaged support for learning and a responsive caregiving. And there's been a gradual increase in all of these. However, looking at the engaged support for learning is a domain that we're putting our emphasis into as well. Again, another graph to show you where we're at with that in regards to our statewide score. Lovely gradual increase. So going back to this, obviously this is our lowest one, but it is a gradual increase. So all in all, we have an increase everywhere that we're looking. So trending is going up, and as long as that's going, I think we can effectively say that everybody chipping in here is doing the right thing. So we'll do the workforce.
So, some highlights and data about the workforce. You can see here demographic information that we present to you each year, the numbers of staff at different levels in Louisiana pathways. You can also see the number of individuals who qualified for the school readiness tax credits, and you can see what that level of tax credit has grown to for 2024. You can see the number of teachers that have benefited from the early childhood ancillary certificate programs. And you can see in here some information about those pilots and sub-grants that I mentioned that kind of arose from the preschool development grant. And so part of our most recent preschool development grant, we implemented a workforce planning grant. And working with several Ready Start networks, we conducted this over 2 years. And so in 2024, we worked with an additional 3 networks. It really helped us conduct a detailed analysis of community level workforce needs. It helped us gather data from local businesses about the economic impact of limited access and affordability for employees to childcare. And it really further investigated challenges that we all know about related to recruitment and preparation and retention and ongoing professional development of professionals so that we can use this data to help propose new solutions to address those issues.
May I ask a question? It mentions working with 3 Ready Start networks. Do you happen to know which networks those were?
I apologize because I did know, but it is not at the top of my brain. I know that we worked with Washington. I believe we worked with Rapides, worked with Tangi as well. Do you want to share anything about that, Carmen, and what the cohort experience was like for you? And so you can see on the next slide some of what Carmen was talking about. But what I can also tell you, Jen, and I can follow up with you and let you know about the Ready Start networks that participated. But what we do whenever we have opportunities like that is that we put the opportunity out to all of the networks and we let them tell us their capacity, because we know that every single one of us as individuals, as centers, as networks, we have different capacity at different points in time. And so whenever we have opportunities, we share the opportunities with those stakeholders, have them tell us if they feel like they, want to really and have the ability to dig in on it. And then after that, when we see the volunteers, then we also look to try to represent the whole state and have diversity there.
And that was precisely why I was asking, to make sure that there was at least one rural community there. And you said Washington Parish, so that was great to hear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And then in addition to what, Carmen shared that you see on in these bullets on this slide, you don't always learn something that's a revelation or that's surprising, but it's still helpful. We don't want to make major decisions based on assumptions, so it's very important to be able to confirm things. And so knowing that educators working with young children with developmental delays or disabilities strongly feel like they need additional support. And so we all have to keep working to build that. And I'll note that this planning grant in 2024 is one of the reasons I think we would have developed it anyway, but that we released some new trainings in EC Learn about early identification and starting to support teachers who work with young children with disabilities, and will continue to lead to the development of more training modules in there. Again, I don't think it's a surprise, but it's important to know that many providers feel overwhelmed and unprepared to handle the business aspects of running an independent site. So it helps us know we need to target additional efforts there as well, or ongoing efforts. And then it provided us with data that 1/3 of the survey participants were between 19 and 25 years of age with limited early childhood work experience. And I would maybe note at that age, probably with limited work experience as well. So less experience with professionalism and other critical work experiences and skills. That approximately 20% of the teachers did have more than 10 years experience, and more than 50% had less than 4 years experience. and that only 27% had obtained an ECAC to become a lead teacher. So this is really important to help us think about when we start thinking about the future of the ECAC program, for example, and how we make that more accessible and more obtainable.
And what are the next steps with the planning grant, with this work group?
Well, the planning grant ended, and so it was data mining and work with those groups and then presenting those findings. And so we'll see, we'll be applying for more grants, but we'll have to figure out what next steps we can take, like Carmen noted, with or without funding. Right. So we just have to keep learning from those lessons, compiling that information, sharing it in communities of practice amongst the networks so that other networks can develop those same kind of pipelines and experiences. So I think that's something we can showcase we have collaboratives twice a year with the early childhood community networks. I think there are lots of ways we can share that information. Again, we finished up our preschool development grant, and we're working on just so many things. We had a family engagement leadership planning grant under the preschool development grant. We supported Healthy Navigators for Louisiana to help childcare providers access health insurance. We continue to work to modernize our early childhood systems. As I mentioned, we did work to support family engagement. Again, we piloted some projects with several Ready Start networks. Again, we asked them who wants to engage in this, who wants to share their results, and we've had them come speak at prior council meetings this year. And so you can see here information about the projects that they did. And again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving unless you have specific questions. And then we continue to work to further develop EdLink and to begin to implement Kinder systems, our new data systems. So before we move on to the quarterly reports, any other questions or comments about the annual report? So we established site improvement planning. I can't give you the exact date, but it has been a program in place probably since 2018 or possibly before. And at that point, I wasn't with the department at that point, but I was with CCR&Rs at that point. And we had a significantly larger number of centers that were approaching proficient and a large clump that fell under 3.75. And so I think it's about looking at the points of that approaching proficient, that, you know, that 3.0, well, 3 to 4.49, and saying, although a 4 is not great and a 4.48 is not great, 3.75 is halfway in that approaching proficient band, and if you're there or below, you need to have the most targeted attention pointed at you. It might be that as we think about site improvement planning moving forward, because as Barry said, that number has decreased thanks to the services of network CCR&Rs, providers doing their own professional development, everybody working together to improve quality. Maybe in site improvement planning moving forward, we need to bump it up. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 And I think it's a really great flag. We have been providing services to more than them. We just haven't officially designated it. And I think, so what we'll do, it is something that is written into Bulletin 140. And so that's something that we could look at bringing forward and maybe increasing that level, because Bulletin 140 actually requires sites that are 3.75 or lower. They are required to participate. And so I think that's something we'd have to put into Bulletin, but we can look at bringing that forward, given how the overall statistics for the field have changed so much.
Real quick, just wanted to highlight a few things back on slides 61 and 62, as Barry talked about those small increases in scores, specifically around instructional support and engaged support for learning. As a class, someone who loves class, I just want to note those small gains in numbers, net true big gains in learning for children. Anybody in the classroom, anyone on the ground understands that those two domains are so difficult to really fine tune because you don't know what a child is going to say. So you can't be ready for everything. Most people come into this industry because they truly love what they do. That's our emotional support. They're, for the most part, organized, but when we look at instructional support, that back and forth analysis and reasoning, that gets difficult. And there's a reason it's difficult. But if we offer that targeted support that Carmen just mentioned, we will see those increases. But I do want to note, like, that's huge. 4.28 is huge and I know we had periods of time, but it's like steering a ship. It will go, but that small growth that's a big gain.
Well, that under 3.75, and now we're closing in on that 4.5, getting closer. So I think we wanted to propose that perhaps we skip over Q1 report or let you ask specific questions if you have them about those slides, and instead move to the Q2 report since it's, more recent updated data. As you may recall, we had another weather event when we were supposed to have the May council meeting. It looked like it would be terrible and dangerous, so we didn't want to put you at risk. And then we had another one today that I hope is also not going to end up being very serious. But we really, obviously, especially because of the bulletin revisions, we wanted to make sure that we did meet with those who were able to have an open discussion about that. So if everyone is okay with it, are there any particular Q1 slides that you wanted to ask questions about or discuss, or can we move on to the Q2 report? We just want to respect your time and your interests and your focus. Okay. So the Q2 report, again, you see the standard information that we share with you in these quarterly reports. You can see the number of sites by site type that were registered and licensed in April, May, and June of this year. Although, you may see slight fluctuations from quarter to quarter, we are very, very pleased that we really see maintenance of those numbers and oftentimes growth. So I don't always know how you do it, but providers do continue to grow and expand access at their sites and in their communities, despite the challenges we know you face. You can see the numbers of children served in Q2 under the CCAP voucher program. We removed a number of children off of the wait list, starting earlier, really starting in the fall and starting in the Q1 of the year. But I think you see some of those numbers showing up now in Q2 as the children kind of entered care again. You do see that as of June, there is still a wait list. It is not insignificant, but grateful for the numbers being served and grateful for the information that we can share with others about the ongoing demand. You can see the numbers of children participating in B-3 seats in Q2. As we mentioned previously, the state has been working to transition the B-3 seats program from local management and administration to state management. And so in Q2, we shared communication with networks and providers related to that transition. We asked networks to provide the department with child data so that we could begin taking over payments. That began July 1st. And we contacted families and continue to do so in the months assigned to them. We'll show you that schedule momentarily with instructions on how to reapply. So we needed to stagger the reapplication so that not all applications came in all at the same time. And so also we could really do targeted outreach to the families because we have employed our call center as well as other staff to make multiple calls to every family and multiple reminders if we don't see that their application has been submitted. You can see the number of children served with funding from the Early Education Fund. You can see the parishes that raised funds for 2025, 2026, and we did receive budget authority from the legislature to give a full one-to-one match for 2025, 2026 to these parishes. So remember that 29.7 million is then doubled. 29.7 million raised locally, matched by the state. So you have a significant increase in investment for early childhood. Of course, we continued our work with community networks on observations and finalizing assessment checkpoints. We continued work with Ready Start networks. Some of the Q2 focuses were helping networks create marketing platforms to further engage community members and fostering especially community partnerships in rural areas and more effectively including educators from rural areas. Very pleased to announce in Q2 the finalists for Leader of the Year. And we have one of those finalists present with us today, serving as a proxy, Ms. Jennifer Stevenson. We also have some former finalists with us today. So grateful for their leadership and the modeling they do. Also our Teacher of the Year finalists. And yes, exactly. I don't believe they're here because they're teaching, but yes. We look forward in the Q3 report to telling you about the winners and to celebrating them and showing them celebrating. In Q2, again, we show you that CCR&Rs assisted 544 early learning sites, providing more than 2,500 hours of coaching, and that mental health consultants supported 153 early learning sites within 1,338 classrooms. We're really excited that EC Learn, our free online professional development platform, continues to grow, both in terms of the offerings we are providing on it. And also in terms of the engagement with it. You can see, I think it's astonishing and wonderful. We just launched it in November, and if you remember, if you look back at those former quarterly reports, we had about 700, 1,000 newly enrolled participants in November and December and January. In April, that jumped to more than 2,200 participants, and in May and June, that jumped to more than 4,000, again, newly enrolled participants. Those are people who haven't taken a prior class. So we're very grateful to see that EC Learn is helping to meet needs of the field. You can see the courses that we added to EC Learn in Q2, courses on infant care, supporting children through the developmental screening and referral process, on the importance of developmental screening in early childhood, and on building positive relationships and collaborative partnerships with families. So we are working to update and add a learning suite for teacher orientation. So we want all the, as you well know, the orientation modules are currently on a different platform. We're moving them all over to EC Learn as quickly as possible. And we're also preparing courses on the ELDS, a workforce business support series. So if you think back to what we told you were the lessons learned from the workforce planning grant, we learned that there needs to be more business support, more business knowledge. And so those should be available in late summer. We can
Quick question.
Yes.
We had talked previously about resources on Dibbles for that transition. Perhaps that could be another module for us?
There are also many modules coming about supporting early language and literacy development. And then I absolutely agree. I think what's probably likely, because we absolutely want to take suggestions of new modules. We've got a nice queue on the way of what we already have planned, and then we want to add additional ideas to that. I think probably what will happen is we'll complete those early language and literacy fundamental modules, get those published. And I could see in our early childhood monthly webinar, us beginning the professional development with smaller segments during that monthly webinar, and then developing all of those into a 1-hour course.
Thank you.
I echo that, and just tying like those fundamental skills of how they tie to Dibbles the screener, because Dibbles is a screener, not an assessment, and just being able to really tie the skills back to the screener, to making sure children are kindergarten ready for the skills, not the screener.
Thank you. Again, in Q2, we continue to work to support young children with disabilities. And so we're very pleased that we were able to purchase and begin distributing Hagerty pre-kindergarten and early pre-kindergarten curriculum to support sites. We're also providing professional development and other language and literacy development resources and materials. Just in Q2, there were 10 virtual curriculum training opportunities held, actually just in June and half of June, and 660 participants joined one of those 10 trainings, and then we have trainings continuing. So very excited again to see that there's such thirst and enthusiasm in the field for the work.
Similar question for the Dibbles with the Hegarty. Is there any, how do I want to ask this? Any plan of doing some type of trainings as well for staff for that transition to the Dibbles?
I think that would be sort of developing the module you were referring to before. I mean, I think there's more than one module that may need to be developed. So I think that as we maybe develop some outlines of what we're intending to put in those modules, those are things that we could bring to stakeholder groups and get some feedback on. Say, this is the training we're currently developing, and this is, what we have heard from other stakeholders they are interested in learning, and get your feedback on whether those are the same components you think should be included.
So potentially the only resource might be the module?
I think that might be the first resource.
Okay,
I
the
think,
first of hopefully many.
as Barry noted, we have a key performance indicator to increase high proficient and excellent scores, but then we have within that we want to increase language and literacy as well. And so there are going to be more and more and more and more resources developed down the line. And when we do have things like grant opportunities, we're going to be wanting to put money towards this language and literacy development work.
Great news. Thank you.
There we go. I can also share that recently we published a language and literacy assessment crosswalk to the website that starts at 3 years old and crosswalks you through the standards, then looks at the TS Gold assessment, and then aligns to the Dibble screener. And then in Q for EC Learn, we have 4 modules that are specifically tailored to Beta 2 and then 3 and 4-year-olds that align with what Libby was speaking about.
You said that's already published?
Not yet. It's in the queue too. We're currently working on it, and I anticipate having that ready by end of August.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And because, of course, I'm going to promote it again, many, many early language and literacy focused sessions at our early childhood conference in September and October. So please come. All right. And then finally today, we know that the statute requires very specific updates in the quarterly report. And so, of course, we want to give you those, but we know you also want to know what's currently going on, not just what happened in the last quarter. And so a few more CCAP Beta 3 updates. Just a reminder, as I said before, that eligibility determinations, or really redeterminations as well, will be conducted by LDOE staff for 2025 to 2026 and moving forward. So again, I'm going to show you a chart in just a moment of the month assigned to each families. We assign them based on parishes, so all families in X parish applied and were notified in a certain month and so on. But all current Beta 3 Seeds families are being notified to submit a new application so they can continue to receive funding from the program through 25-26. We are absolutely continuing to serve all children in the program until their redetermination has been completed. because we want to make sure there is continuity of care. Payments for the seats for the currently enrolled children continued through the networks through June, but beginning in July, with July 1st, the department began making those payments directly to the providers. And so we are making those payments prospectively, just as we do for the voucher seat payments, and we are making them weekly, just as we do for the voucher seat payments, and we are making them through the same banking accounts that providers currently receive their voucher payments. In the coming months, those B to 3 seats children will be added to the that the voucher children and families already use. And so we will be announcing that in newsletters, in webinars, and blast emails. But just wanting to make sure everybody is prepared for that, that once we've added those children to the rosters, we will ask you to make sure the families begin signing in and out of KinderConnect daily, just as the voucher seat children do. We do know that transitions are sometimes a little stressful, but we are really excited that it is finally taking place so that we can get to the other side of it as soon as possible, because we do believe that the transition will lead to ensuring that payments are made consistently and timely to all providers across the state, and that families have the same sort of application standards and requirements as the voucher children do. It also helps us ensure, because we will be able to use CCDF, federal money, for it, since we're determining the eligibility. It helps us confirm that now children will be confirmed for a full 12 months of eligibility and will, unless they're no longer eligible, continue in the program at each annual redetermination period. And the other benefit is that by using CCDF funds, we are obligated, which we want to do anyway, to serve all siblings in the household. And so we're now not only serving B to 3 children through contracted seats, but we're able to serve older children also in need of care through the voucher seats. So we do appreciate all the support from the field, all the feedback of what we need to clarify, and that partnership in this transition. We are transitioning from the current legacy application system, CAFE, to a new online application called Family Central. So we're really piloting that with our B to 3 seats families, and eventually that will be the online system used by all voucher families as well. And again, current B to 3 seat families from numerous parishes have already begun submitting their applications to the department. We've already got hundreds and thousands plus of applications in. We are supporting families in their reapplication through FAQs, technical support from that online application vendor, the call center, and our strategy office and CCAP office. And here you can see the families who were contacted in May and in June, the parishes that these families are from, as well as those being contacted this month. I believe those contacts went out this week, and the families that will be contacted in August to apply. And so providers, many of you may also have gotten calls from our staff saying, we've had trouble reaching Karen Powell. Please help us get in touch with her and help make sure she submits her application. So any questions or comments?
I do have a quick question. Will B to 3 families be able to change providers?
So there's a lot still to figure out with B to 3. The focus right now is we want to make sure there's continuity of care. So we're making sure that we get all children transferred over, secured for the next year, and then we are going to look at how to handle needed transfers, what procedures there would be, and really establishing those contracts and seeing whether there could be any additional numbers added to the contracts. So there's certainly more to come, but we really are, I would love to have it all done at once, but we're really having to make sure that we have a strong data system in place and we're doing strong comms not to lose families and getting them all transitioned. And then we'll be looking at that.
Thank you.
All right, just over 3 minutes. Any other questions, comments from the public or our committee? Just note, our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, September 17th, and be careful in the rain. We appreciate everybody's time. The meeting is adjourned. Did I speed through that too quick? I apologize.
Thank you. My name is Conrad Appel. I'm at-large Bessie member, and I have a particular passion for early childhood, so I'm here. But there's a couple of things that I'd like to share with y'all, just and not for deep discussion. One has to do with what the 30,000-foot view is from Bessie perspective. The other has to do with funding. First of all, from Bessie perspective, what we're looking at is, and this is statistically apples to oranges, but it's all we've got, is that kindergarten students coming to kindergarten are woefully underprepared. The numbers are bad. We also see some improvement between kindergarten and third grade. It's not tremendous, but there's some improvement along the way. When you get to third grade, we have trouble with reading, and so we've instituted the intensive tutoring. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a problem, but it's all we got. And we have greatly optimistic that will be important and will show great results, and it probably already is. We're going to be moving toward mathematics and numeracy with the same concept. But again, we're putting Band-Aids on what are really societal problems. The big 30,000-foot view is by the time these kids are graduating from high school, we're graduating far too many that are basic and below. The numbers are mind-blowing. I mean, these are people who've spent an entire academic career and basically have nothing to show for it. That's the significance of starting out with a really strong foundation. That's what you guys are doing. But where it gets to be apples to oranges is that y'all only represent X number of kids, and there's a lot more kids out there that are not being touched. Karen knows this, that we've been fighting with the legislature for a long time, trying to get additional funding, and that gets to the funding issue, and to me, it's somewhat dismal, and I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, what could be a real positive is dissolution of the Federal Department of Education. That could mean a whole lot of money that's currently flowing to the federal government might flow directly to the Department of Education and create a big pool of funds. But it could be the opposite. I don't know. But it's something to watch. And then the last thing is, here's the problem at the state level. We have limited resources. This is not a rich state. It's a poor state, and our economic base is shrinking. It's not growing. So we have three big competing programs that are competing for scarce resources. We have the MFP, which is the basic funding for public education. We have early childhood, which is like a little side piece over here. And now we have Gator. So suddenly the legislature is sitting there and they're getting pounded from different sources with demands for funds that may not exist. So it's something to watch out for. I'm just giving y'all what to watch out for coming up. The ability for the state to fund these programs, in particular early childhood, which is my passion, may be strongly limited. It may be a problem going forward because I just don't see the state's revenues increasing, and yet we're competing for these scarce revenues in different education venues. So you have our word, at least my word, and those that sit on Bessie with me, that early childhood is a priority. And we have just far too many poor children in this state that have no chance of achieving at the end of their high school career if we don't start them with a strong foundation when they're little bitty kids. So I just wanted to share that with you. I made a few notes while we were talking, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I think you'll find most Bessie members in full agreement with what I'm saying. So thank you.
Can I give a quick reply and just say I sincerely appreciate it? And you alluded to something that I think goes unspoken a lot, And that's, and you know, when we look at the numbers that we were talking about earlier, if you, we're talking about kindergarten readiness, and what was the percentage that we're at now, ballpark? I mean, we're still in the 52s, so it's a little lower now. So if we look at the number of at access by age and funding sources, the totals, we're looking at you know, we're serving 173,820. But if there's the underserved estimate, we're looking at, I mean, according to this, I don't know where this came from, but 116,000. And so I often say, you know, we talk about these quality measures and improvements, which I think is fantastic. Just like you said earlier, Paula, it's, we're doing great things, but what you said is the underserved, and I don't know if you use that word, but it's the ones that we're not getting to, that aren't in these early childhood programs. We talk about, you know, enhancing quality, which is super important. But I think the focus should be on grabbing the underserved and explaining the importance of them. And I think that involves a lot of community outreach. And so we focus on quality a lot. And I think that's important. But I think a bigger focus and a shift could be to shifting some of that into outreach and bringing those families that don't understand the importance and or can't afford it, bringing those into the early childhood realms, into the existing programs that we have.
Well, that was the apples and oranges illusion that I was making, that there are X number of kids that are in the programs, and there's a whole lot more that aren't. But what Bessie's looking at is the numbers at kindergarten, which is the aggregate number.
Mm-hmm.
So we know on an aggregate level, we're not doing real well. But what we don't know is how well the ones that are coming through y'all centers are doing. We don't have that disaggregated data so that we can look at it. So we're having to speculate, and that's not the best thing. But we do have a fiscal problem in that we have to fight over a limited pot of funds. That extra group of people, that 50% more that you're talking about, I mean, I don't know where we're going to get the money. And unless maybe there's something changes at the federal level, maybe, and I mean, that's just pie in the sky right now. And some of that money could flow back in. We could focus it on early childhood and on tutoring and these other programs that we know work, but we just don't have the resources. So anyway, I didn't want to start a great conversation. I just wanted to point that out to you guys.
Appreciate it.